All right, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the internet. Welcome to our weekly live stream interview and performance series. Today, we have a very special treat, a wonderful saxophonist and composer and great musician all around the Pacific Northwest and beyond, the great Cliff Colón. Cliff, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so Cliff and I, we grew up together playing music together, and I know a lot about Cliff, but with these interviews, it's great because I always get to find out more information that I didn't know. And as always, so we'll do the interview here for about 45 minutes, and then open up the last 15 minutes for questions. So if you have questions for Cliff or myself, you can throw them in the comments now if you'd like, and we'll do our best to get to them after the fact. And if you miss the live stream and you're looking at this after the fact, you can always still put the comments in the questions in the comments later, and we'll do our best to get to them. So anyways, Cliff, for people that don't know you and your music here or out there in the world, can you talk a little bit about how you got started playing music?
Started playing music, so probably the same as you. We're in 6th grade. We had to pick an instrument on what we were going to play, and I had to make a decision at that point. And I remember always my favorite movie was Back to the Future, and there was a scene in there where the Enchantment Under the Sea dance, and there was a there's a jazz band playing at it, and I always liked the sax player from it, and he was playing Night Train, and I said, I really like the movie, so I wanted to pick the tenor sax because that's the one that he played, and that's the one I selected. And my band teacher at the time was like, it's kind of big for you, but I was determined to play the Night Train from Back to the Future. So I picked that up in 6th grade and immediately started working on trying to play the sax so I could play that particular song. So that's how I got started. So just like everyone else. So.
Yeah. Well, so now for people that don't know you, where did you grow up? Where did you start?
Yeah, so I grew up in Lakewood, Washington, which is kind of the suburbs of Tacoma, the mean streets of Lakewood. And I grew up there my entire life. And then I've always lived in the general Tacoma area somewhere around. So, but yeah, born and raised in Lakewood, Washington. So. And
did growing up, was there a lot of music in your house? Did your parents have music around, or your siblings or grandparents?
Yeah, I'm kind of first gen, I think, for like a full-time musician. My parents, neither of them played anything. We didn't really listen to a lot of music either. My dad used to like Gloria Estefan and Miami Sound Machine, so he listened to that, and they had the Thriller album, and I remember listening to Michael Jackson. But beyond that, we didn't really listen to a whole bunch of music growing up, so I was kind of a clean slate for music when I was growing up. My grandfather did play a little piano. He was pretty good too. He could play any song in C major. Like he was good at doing that, but like he was never formally trained or anything. And the time was a little, it's kind of like a saloon piano, but he was good at that. But but it didn't really come from a musical family. So.
Well, so we're kind of in the same boat in that regard. But I know for me, like I got into music, there were certain things that I liked. I mean, there was music in the house. So when you started becoming aware of music, were there any groups or things that you enjoyed before joining band that kind of piqued your interest?
No, not really. It was we were told that we had to join the band, and so I just picked my instrument and did it. I had no interest in music. A lot of my friends, they all, I don't want to date myself, but they all had their cassette tapes of different things. I remember the people were into various music at the time, like Guns N' Roses and stuff. I was never into it. I didn't really care about music that much when I was growing up, at least like in elementary school. So.
Well, so you joined band, started playing an instrument. So once you started playing, did you start becoming interested in any groups or musicians in particular?
Yeah, it's kind of funny now, but well, first, I was determined to learn the Back to the Future song, and then there was a sax player, Candy Dolfer. She had a song, Lily Was Here, and I always thought I had the hots for her, and so I was into that. And then when I started to heard about jazz, I didn't know what jazz was, and again, I was basically a clean slate, so I didn't know much about anything music-wise, and so I started listening to big bands, like I started listening to Benny Goodman and Count Basie and stuff, because people were telling me a little bit about that when I was in junior high, 7th grade. And then my uncle at the time, he played saxophone when he was a kid, and he knew a little bit about jazz saxophonists. So he burnt me, or he made me some cassette tapes of famous tenor saxophonists, Coltrane and Dexter Gordon and Charlie Parker and stuff. And he said, you got to listen to John Coltrane if you play tenor sax. And so the album that he burnt for me is called Sunship. I don't know if you know that one, but the the opening track is kind of intense for the untrained ear, and so it's a and I'm like, this guy sucks. Like, what? Why do you want me to listen to him? So then I put a Coltrane on the back burner because I just remember Sunship, and then I got into Charlie Parker and stuff. And
I had almost not the same album, but the same initial response to John Coltrane, because prior to that, it was all Charlie Parker, Charlie Parker cassettes, super clean, super precise, all of this. And the first time I heard John Coltrane, no one explained, and I didn't have an idea that there were different decades of it.
Yeah.
And so I heard late John Coltrane, and I thought it was just like, this. What's all the fuss about? This guy's terrible.
Yeah.
So
don't start with late Coltrane.
Start with early John Coltrane.
Go early, yeah.
All right, very cool. And it's funny, Candy Dolfer, I remember reading somewhere, I believe, I might be wrong, but I don't think I am, that there was some sort of connection with her father, who was European, and Dexter Gordon. Like, I guess they were running mates or running buddies or something, and so that's how she got started playing. I think.
That's cool.
I think that's in there somewhere. So.
Yeah, it's funny that I mentioned it, because I was on Instagram, and I was watching this funk little trio that's on Instagram, and then I see Candy Dolfer, like, oh yeah, I used to watch her, and I think she's about 9 years older than me now. Now when I look back, but I was into Candy Dolfer back then.
I'm pretty sure many of us that played in like middle school jazz band or stage band probably played an arrangement of Lily Was Here. I know we did back in the day.
Yeah, that was the jam.
Right on. So and so this was you started band in elementary school?
In 6th grade, yeah.
6th grade. Is that middle school? Middle school, yes?
Yeah, well, other schools did like middle school stuff. This is elementary school, and then we did junior high, so 7th through 9th was junior high.
So we're there. I mean, we're basically almost a few months older than me, but same area.
I'm thinking about a week older than you.
Yeah. So, but from your perspective, growing up at that time, were there places where you could go and hear music or see music, or any of your friends were playing? Or
back then, no. At least in elementary and junior high. Again, no outlets, there was no other like bands playing or like coffee shops or anything like that. So again, I was listening to big band stuff. Benny Goodman, I thought that was even that's probably was like 70 years old or whatever, 50 years old. So no, back then, no. It was only in high school that I started to actually go to a jazz club, and that's when you really got inspired, because you could see the real players and the veterans and stuff coming out for that at Kelly's and other places like that. So, but not in junior high. It was very that was kind of my practice time without really knowing what a club was or what music was supposed to be like.
Were there other peers that were in your program that were good players that are still around playing today, or that you get together and jam with?
I'm the last of the school people. I think that's still playing. All my friends, they played something, but they eventually drop it after a while. Because they did it because they had to do it. I always took an interest of it, and I started getting better at transcribing and stuff, and writing out those. I just took when my friends were playing basketball or they're playing video games or whatever, I was just practicing because I thought I was super fascinated in it, and music was again a clean slate. So and then started to get good at like my ears and stuff, and being able to hear certain things. And but yeah, no one else I don't think really plays that I grew up with, or if they did, it might be on the side or something. But
okay, so then let's jump ahead to high school now. So you attended Lakes High School?
Yeah.
Okay, so now they had a jazz band, yes.
Yep.
And so what about peers in that group? Any musicians that are around that are still playing, or?
Our drummer, his name was Tim Latona. He plays in it's not grunge. It's like mathcore, like heavy metal style band called Botch. It's a real well known around the area. But yeah, no one's really playing jazz. A few of my friends went over to when they went to college, they played in the marching band like at UW, and I have my alto friend of mine plays like in the church band and stuff. But I think I was probably the only one that really played at clubs where you get paid and stuff for it. I think the rest of it is more of a hobby thing now. So.
Well, let's talk about. I already know the answer to this, but I want other people to know about this. Let's talk about your early music education in terms of private lessons. So you did study privately, so can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so that was one thing my parents did know, is that I needed to take lessons right away. So in 6th grade, they got a real cheap, it was real bad saxophone, and they had set me up with a teacher, a college guy over at Pierce, I think at the time, and he taught me for maybe a month or two, and then he got caught up and had to do something else. So then I started studying with this guy in the Army band, and he was real taskmaster and really scared me. Gave me like a 3 strikes rule. If I came unprepared to a lesson, three lessons total, he was going to drop me. And so I was always fearful of those lessons. And then after that, I started studying with. He was the oboist for the Tacoma Symphony at Mr. Burgesson, and he also played sax, and he taught me how to growl like on Night Train and stuff, and he taught me a lot of classical fundamentals. So we just did classical the whole time, scales, the different books. And when I was in high school, I started to take more of an interest in jazz, and so that's when one of my other sax peers, he started studying with Tracy Knoop, and really progressing really quickly, and I'm like, I want to progress quickly too. So then I started studying with Tracy, and that's where that's where the fun began. So that's where he really taught me basically everything about being a musician, on theory, on ear training, on transcribing, on the lineage of jazz, the lineage of tenor saxophonists, what to do at a gig, what not to do. And that's when I first started hearing about this Kareem guy. Because Tracy would assign me certain songs to transcribe, and if I made an excuse or whatever, like, I'm sorry, Tracy, I didn't finish the transcription. He's like, oh, Kareem did this in a week. I'm like, well, who's this Kareem guy? But again, he really set me up for listening to the right things and starting with, going through the progression of the years, and because I eventually towards the end of high school I really wanted to get into the modern guys, but he was holding me back, just like, okay, we got to go through the natural progression of it. So, but yeah, I think that was basically my my education in jazz. Like I learned a lot just within those lessons, more than the first few years of college of music. So,
Well, yeah, I remember doing lessons with Tracy at the same time, and also classical, and then you do solo and ensemble contest. And I remember, I don't know why, but for some reason I was at Clover Park, and that was the first time I saw you, and I was completely floored, because here you came in and you played a piece on soprano, and you had it all memorized. Like an entire, one little song, sure, memorize that, but an entire classical piece for solo and ensemble. I was floored. I was like, wow, that's impressive.
I remember being so nervous on that one, because I think I went to state the year before, and I went for a piece that Mr. Burgesson taught me at that time, and then I had made that I was taking lessons for both at the same time, and then I always liked doing soprano for the solo ensemble, because we could do oboe pieces and clarinet pieces. I thought, because I didn't, at the time at least, there wasn't a whole bunch of good sax solo ensemble, like classical features. So, but yeah, I remember on that one, I had it memorized, and it was like a bad dream, because you're there. I knew who you were at that time, because I think I saw you at there was a state band at the Temple Theater, but every sax player in town in the district was there in the room, and then it's already nerve-wracking enough on whoever the judge is, but then the judge is Tracy.
I remember this. Yes,
my
that's
teacher
right.
that knows every weakness I have and knows where I'm going to mess up was the judge, and I remember being really nervous on that, and I think I had to stop because I was so nervous. I had like a nervous vibrato. And I had to stop and restart, refresh it on. And I remember at that point I wanted to chuck my soprano outside. My dad stopped me because it cost a lot of money. But at that point I really wanted to just go full on jazz, because I didn't like the pressure of with the classical. I had to play it perfect. There was no creativity, I felt like, with it. So exactly right, exactly. I was just written no creative liberty on it, and with jazz, I always felt that the mistakes are what's the cool part about it. Like, you could take a mistake and build a solo off of it, and now it's cool. And I always really like that. But yeah, I remember that day vividly. So.
Right on. Right. Well, like I said, you scared the hell out of me. I was like, how are you going to memorize this entire? What? You did great. Don't worry about it. All right. So high school. You mentioned Red Kelly's, of course, the great bassist Red Kelly, who had his club originally down in Tumwater and then relocated to Tacoma. There's a lot of stuff going on there. Any other clubs that during high school that you'd go check out or be around the scene on?
Not really clubs. I mean, I would again, we didn't have a lot of money growing up, but I would try to save whatever I could to pay the cover charge to get into Kelly's and order a coffee, and maybe if I had couple extra bucks, I'd get the red beans and rice, and just wait to see who would show up there. If Bill Ramsey would show, or maybe Tracy would come. I remember vividly when Pete Chrisley walked in one time and played. But as far as other clubs, not really clubs. I remember going to, they had the Starbucks Java, like I forget what they called the concert. It was up in Seattle, where Roosevelt and Garfield and all like the hot schools. And I would go there and get these program and get the list of all the players, and I would want to hear all the tenor players and say, oh man, this guy's really good. Oh, this person's good. This person's good. And I would do that every year. I'd go to that concert, Hot Java, Cool Jazz. That's what it was. Yeah. So, and then a lot of the players I remember circling, I eventually start to meet and play with, maybe 10 years later. But that was basically the only club until, and then I started, trying to sneak into clubs to jam. Grounds for Coffee was the one.
I remember also, speaking of being impressed by you and your playing, I remember because I would work the door at Drake's for Tracy and take the money at the door.
That's
but you would come and sit in there and play. I remember that.
Yeah, that's I guess. Yeah, now I think of it, there's a lot of clubs that are no longer exist anymore. But Drake's was a really cool one. It was multiple floors, from what I remember. And you were always the door guy for all the musicians because I remember I think over at Kelly's or Rams liked having you because you were charging everyone, no matter if they were one of the friends of the musicians. So
I'll tell the story just for context. But I was working the door for Tracy, and basically once a week at Drake's. And I knew of Bill Ramsey, but I didn't know what Bill Ramsey looked like. Yeah. And so these two couples came to the door, and it was Bill Ramsey and his wife, Frankie, and the great saxophonist Chuck Stentz and his wife, Jan Stentz, who was just a very well-known vocalist. These are like jazz royalty. Yeah. And I had no idea who these people were. And they wanted to get in without paying cover, like guest list. And I'm like, no, I'm sorry, you have to pay a cover like everybody else. And so it caused a bit of a row. And so they called Tracy over, and Tracy said, "Oh, Kareem, I'd like to introduce you to Bill Ramsey and his wife Frankie." And I was like, I was mortified. Of course, come on in. I'm so sorry. And from that point on, Bill would always call me to work the door at Kelly's because he knew I was going to make everybody pay a cover charge. Yeah. So that's how I first met Bill, and that was the beginning of our beautiful friendship.
Yeah, I was like, man, how did Kareem get that gig for? He's the door guy, and everyone's gig is because you're a good door guy. So.
Well, also, I mean, because I think it was high school. Maybe I'm wrong, but there was the session at Grounds for Coffee, right? Was that high school for you?
That was like right after high school.
Okay.
I think I formed a small combo at the time, right after graduating from high school with some local guys. We called it New Impressions Jazz Quartet. Or we started off, we might call it swing set first, and then went to New Impressions to be more cool. And then the Grounds for Coffee was opened up at that point, and they had it was a happening jam session on Saturday nights over there with David Keys, and that was a lot of fun. That was my first time really doing that kind of thing, and you never knew who was you were coming there. Other sax guys, Ollie Jackson came that one time.
I remember they had Floyd Stanford came down a few times. Ruel Lubag was down there. I'm trying to remember who else.
I remember Dean Schmidt was the bass player for a lot of it. That was really cool. Like that whole idea of a jam session that was my first experience with it, and folding on a song one week and coming back the next week trying it again, and hopefully did a little better. And then I guess Roof and Deuce back down there. We used to do a Friday. So I do a Friday night at Roof and Deuce. Maybe go up to Grounds to go check to see whoever's playing over there, and then Saturday night doing the jam session at Grounds, and then I would work an overnight shift at KPLU at the radio station from like 11 p.m. to 6 a.m. and
KPLU now KNKX.
KNKX, yeah. But at the time it was KPLU, and I was fortunate to get that overnight shift where every hour I had to flip the tape on the. They had tapes back then, but then the rest of the hour I had access to every single jazz album, and so I'd be transcribing and listening to things, ordering pizzas, and sometimes had some musician buddies come over, and we would listen to tunes and stuff. That was really cool. So that was kind of my education with jazz. So I didn't study it formally at college. So
if I'm remembering the musicians that were the running crew back then at Roof and Doofs, and it was Peter Teachin, drummer Peter Teachin. Gust Burns?
Gust? Well, Gust was not at Roof and Doofs, more at Grounds when we did a little thing at Grounds, but yeah. He eventually went up to Western, and so then we did we went through a few different chordal instruments. Andy Morgan, I remember, played some guitar with us. RIP on Andy, and then Marcus Van was the bass player. Demetrius Motion back then too. So yeah.
All right. So gigging, studying, playing, watching stuff, and then after Lakes, you went to
PLU.
To PLU, and the plan there. You said you didn't study music. So what were you doing?
Well, I went there when I first went there. I went there for music because I got a music. I went to the place that gave me the most scholarships, and so PLU gave me the most scholarships at the time, and so you're part of the band program. Had to take lessons, and for my first semester, I was a performance major, and I remember having to take these classes like. I was taking these classes. One of the classes I remember, I'm writing a report on Mozart's sister and the importance of. And I'm like, well, I just wanted to play some jazz gigs. I'm like, how is this helping me become a jazz musician? I had a really great. I mean, Mark Taylor was the teacher there, so playing the music was cool. The musicians that were there were cool, doing the after-school jam sessions, doing the private lessons. That was all great. I just didn't like all the other training stuff. And then because Tracy was such a good teacher, like the ear training was. I took the test and passed out of the ear training and music theory. I learned all that stuff from Tracy, like diatonic chords and scales and everything. And so I felt at the time, and I saw my college debt adding up. I'm like, oh, how am I going to pay all this off with $100 club gigs or whatever? So I switched. Eventually, wanted to have something else besides music, so I did computer stuff at that time. And so when I was going through school, I was a music minor, but. And most of those were because Tracy again was really great with theory and stuff. I was able to pass out for a lot of those tests. So.
I will add this just for fuel for the fire. Is it true, Mr. Colón, that you have perfect pitch? Might I remind you are on the stand?
Yes. I learned that when I was transcribing Candy Dolfer, when I was my friends, they weren't hearing the notes like in the same way for me, and for me it was like. I don't know, colors like the red. Oh, that's red. That's E. That's F. And so I started getting better. And when you're transcribing, being able to transcribe without having my sax there with me, I didn't know what it was. I'm not one of those ones that could, someone plays a cluster chord and I just name the chord. Like there's some really advanced, but single note stuff, yeah. And it's definitely been beneficial for hearing stuff when you're playing if you don't know the song. You hear it pretty well. It's also could drive you crazy because like I hear this fan and I hear the notes on those kind of things, lights, elevator chimes. It drives you. Oh, that's E, that's F. So that kind of stuff could drive you a little bonkers. But I guess it's handy. So.
Well, can you talk a little bit, just because it's, I think, important to know just the climate and what was around at PLU at the time. Part of the Roger Gard dynasty initially?
I was, yeah.
Yes.
Roger Gard was my first instructor there.
Can you talk about Roger a little bit?
Yeah, amazing teacher, Roger Gard, trombonist. Piano too, right? He played some good piano too, and I was in the big band with him for I think it was his last year there, and then Don Immel came afterwards. But Roger was one of the. Roger knew Bill Ramsey, and that was like a good. I still hadn't really talked to Bill at that time, and he, I guess Bill came in one time to the big band rehearsal in the old Eastfield Auditorium, and he had this humongous sound. Like he just came in there, played, and it was so loud and so big and fat, and all the sax players were jaws dropped, and Roger was just like the coolest. Like what a old-time jazz musician would be, and just everyone really respected him. And I remember when he told a story for when he says when he passes away, he wants to have a line of trombone players to play when the Saints go marching in. And so when years later when he passed away and they had the memorial service, I remember that all the bone players were there. Every bone player in town was there, and I think I came to. You're probably there. And I think that's It was a big jam session type thing, Dixieland style. But yeah, great teacher. Great big band instructor and everything.
And he had been there for a long time developing
Years.
that program.
Yeah, for years. And then when he left, then I was worried. Oh, I'm at the school now. And then Don Immel came, another trombonist, a virtuoso trombonist, and really did a different approach, but a great instructor, and brought a lot of. The folks from Central Washington University at that time that he kind of grew up with. That's where I met Frank Seeberger and Jim Sisko and all those musicians, and that was really cool. And then after him, a professor not to be named, and then that's
I know exactly.
Your favorite one. And then so that was when I was there. Yeah. So.
Let's see. So I know also let's talk about some of your peers in college too, because I know that a lot of great players have come out of that. And you mentioned Marcus Van, who's a tremendous talent. We've interviewed him here before. But can you talk about some of the other players and who's around and doing stuff?
Who's still playing? Well, PLU is more of a classical program than a jazz one. You start becoming buddies with all the jazz people that you're over there with. I'm trying to think who's still out there. A lot of the players that were at the time, they became really great band instructors. They all studied under Radel Bradley, who was a mentor for so many people back in Tacoma for conducting and classical chops and everything. And so a lot of the players that were in the bands at that time went on to more of the education type thing. Marcus is out there touring with, he's doing the Moulin Rouge show, the touring fun. Trying to think who else is out there still gig. Well, let's see. Yeah, most of them are all one education, I think, for the most part. So, trying to think. I don't think there's anyone that's really. There's some vocal. Hillary Gardner, she's a vocalist at the time. Went on to New York and started doing. I saw her on a Netflix show one time singing, and she did it. Which is cool. That's my wife Sommer. I met. She went the performance route with me. There's a couple other vocalists, jazz vocalists, that also did that too. So, but yeah.
All right. So, playing gigs, going to school, in both music and computer science. Oh, wait, before I switch gears here, there's another, speaking of other instructors, you mentioned Mark Taylor. There's also another great saxophone player who's not playing as much as he used to, but Saul Klein. Didn't you study with Saul as well?
Yeah, I studied with Saul. He was a great instructor too. And there's still stuff that Saul taught me. It was above my head at the time. I didn't get it then, but years later, even 20 years later, like the way that he would approach going through scales, like you were talking, it was funny when you were talking with my son, for like when you were talking about the thirds and stuff, on, going up and then going down, like he would teach me to go, there's like a up, and up, down, and down, up, and like a contra code, and down, down. And the way that he would approach soloing was very unique. It was different than Tracy, different than Mark, very unique. So he pinpointed stuff and like things that I was doing that I had no idea, phrase-wise with soloing. Hey, he's like, Cliff, you start every start of every phrase that you do when you solo on this beat, or this beat. You don't change it up on any of it. So then we spent a whole semester practicing solos where I could only enter on the end of one or on the end of four, and doing that, and then I had to end it on certain parts of the phrase too. And so that was really valuable for me at the time. And then also, he's the one that really stressed when I'm transcribing. He didn't want me to write it out. He wanted me to memorize it, not write it out. And a lot of those solos that I transcribe mentally, like they stick with you longer. Like when you buy the book, you're gonna forget it. If you write it out, yeah, you do better. If you just memorize it without writing it, it gets ingrained in you. And that was really, I thought that was really valuable. So I wish he played a lot more around town, but he's a great clarinet player too. So he's.
All right, so then what happened after, well, actually, wait a minute. I know PLU, and I was asking about different colleges and these things when people are attending, but they usually would do a good job of bringing in guest artists and things. Are there any memorable concerts that you saw or clinicians that came in?
Ellis Marsalis came one time. UPS always had the really good artists, but I remember when Ellis Marsalis came, and because I was a big fan of Branford at that point, and so meeting Branford's dad was a big honor. And I remember I got to take a solo, and he was playing piano. He gave me a nod, so that was like the cloud nine for that. Because again, I'm a big fan of all the Marsalises, but yeah, that was the one I remember the most. So.
And what about any trips? Like I remember a bunch that I did in college, but how about you? Any college trips that stick out in your mind? Any festivals or?
Yeah, I mean, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. But we had some fun trips like at Lionel Hampton and Reno, different band trips. Like we would do stuff around town for recruiting some of the high school kids and stuff. I think we did a couple joint shows. I remember you were at one. I don't know if it was with Purest or Olympic or what. Yeah. I don't know. Hampton was always cool. It's got to see, back then, Joshua Redmond was just coming out, and that was really cool. Diana Krall had that album that was big. Igor Boutman, I remember, was over at Hampton. Yeah, but those were all real fun times, and I was when I first started going to those. I remember going to Hawaii too for one, which was really cool, and the seniors were kind of, I don't know, hazing the young guys. So even though we were like Marcus and I were the hot young whippersnappers, the seniors would still give us a hard time and stuff. So yeah, it was fun time.
What about I had a question, I just lost it. Festivals, performing. Lionel Hampton, going to Lionel Hampton. Do you remember any workshops or clinics, or I mean, you mentioned some of the guest artists, but anything when you were there that kind of stuck out that you thought was helpful? I mean, it seems to me that the festival at that time, when we were
Yeah.
in late '90s,
Well,
it seemed
Hampton
like,
was still around. Like, yeah.
yeah, and also it seemed like they had more sponsorship. Like when you won first place in a division, like you won a saxophone, or
Yeah.
you know, and it seemed like the level of all that stuff has changed dramatically over the years.
I haven't been there for 20 years, I guess now, but back then, again, it was just cool that you're just in this culture. You never know who you're going to run into at a hotel. It was cool at the building. I remember this might have been in high school actually, or no, I think it was at PLU, and I had it's with the professor that we're talking about, but I remember I had a ballad feature, and I wanted to do really good because I was at Hampton and there's people there, and something happened on at the end of the song. You're supposed to do a nice cadenza type thing, and I had something and it kind of got messed up as far as like the conducting in the band and stuff, and it just totally fell apart. And I remember I squeaked. I had a humongous squeak in the middle of the ballad. Like it was just really bad, and so then I'm mortified. My mom's giving me a pep talk, and then we're out there, and it was Benny Golson, I think, he was there, and like gave my like a little pep talk about, I squeaked earlier today. He made it so the squeaking was that's okay. So and that was pretty cool. But yeah, I always liked. I think Joshua Redmond did this. I don't. You were probably there for that one where he played My Funny Valentine, and he did back in that time where he was doing like the low notes and then doing the solos and then hitting the high altissimo back to the low and then soloing, and he just brought the house down. I mean, the arena. It was a humongous arena. So that particular concert was the one that was just killer. So.
I wanted to ask you, because I also think this is important too, because I remember back in the day when we were late teens,
Yeah.
aside from our college bands, we also played in the Pierce College Band when Norm Wallen was directing it. Now, this is not the later period. This is the earlier period, because I remember I was like 17 at the time. And can you talk a little bit about that?
Did we play? We played with Norm then too.
I did. I thought you did too.
I just remember being in the Ringer band with. I might have. Maybe I forgot all those details of that one. I just remember the one that we talk about frequently on the Ringer band, but
We'll discuss that soon. We're getting to that.
Okay. I don't remember the details on that one, but yeah, I was trying to play with all sorts of bands. So like, I play with there's many different big bands that were around. That back then there was a lot more big bands than there are now. Like back then, it was a lot more important on the doubling and stuff, which I always was terrible at. Ask Tracy, but. Yeah, I was in a big band. It seemed like every night of the week, and made $5 a night, maybe. But yeah, I forget kind of the early days with Norm, but I guess I kind of overrid it with some of the later stuff with Norm, which was cool.
So let's talk. Okay, you're graduating college now. You graduated with a degree in computer science.
Computer science, yeah.
Okay, so then what happened? What are you up to?
Well, at the time, a lot of my peers and the people that were going to school, they were into education and they wanted to teach. They were teaching band, and I always just wanted to play. That was my main thing. And so I tried doing teaching. You were always really good at teaching. Tracy was. There's other sax teachers. I never really. I always got frustrated with it, and so I wanted to have at one point I tried doing music full time after that, and I found that I hated music. I hated. Because I'm playing the gig and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to pay this bill with this gig, and then tomorrow I'll play this gig and I'll maybe pay my phone bill with that one. And it kind of took the love out of the music for me. So I always I'd rather hate my day job and love every single gig that I do. That was kind of the philosophy I had. So I kind of got rid of doing students, teaching the students, and just did the day gig. So I started doing. During school I was doing overnight shifts at Intel at the time, and I was doing computer stuff. And so by the time I'm done with school, I had a couple years experience. And even though I wasn't the best at computers compared to some of my peers, and they didn't have any experience, and I did. I had 2 years of experience at Intel, so able to get a job right away, and just real fortunate on being at the right place at the right time. The networking in computers is just like how it is in music, where someone you might have worked with 20 years ago will help get you a gig down the road. And so I started working at Microsoft a little after that, and other places. But yeah, so after school, I was just trying to play as much as I could, trying to. Again, I flirted with the idea of being like total full time, like teaching and all that stuff, and I always liked having the balance of. Music, there's not a 401k plan or anything like that, or the medical stuff. At least in the U.S., it's a little tougher. So again, it was all for me. It was like trying to get my name out there at the time, because especially during those times, I felt it was a lot more. It was hard to break into the scene, especially in Seattle. You were the Tacoma guy. You probably experienced it too, and it was really hard at that time. It always felt that you're either a Seattle guy or you're a Tacoma guy. Now I don't think they care. Like people. For me, it always felt like, well, yeah, my bed where I sleep at night is in Tacoma, but I always wanted to be a Northwest kind of musician. So just kind of trying to go to different jam sessions and different gigs and meet different players and all that stuff, and just play as much as I could. So.
I remember late 90s, tail end of high school, college. The big one for me was going up to, we talked about the Grounds for Coffee one, but going up to Tula's on Sunday. That's when Andre Thomas and Ruel Lubeg and Michael Bezio were up there. Did you go up to that one and check it out a lot? Or
Yeah, I went to the one where, I don't know if Ruel was running it at that point. It was, I remember with Mark Seals was running it at that one, and that was super nerve-wracking because I'd done the jam sessions in Tacoma. Now you're in Seattle, and you never know who's going to come over there. And that's the one where I was there in the audience, and I thought I was going to play. I had my sax, and I had a couple songs in mind that I could do okay on it for this. And in walks Rick Mandyke, and I didn't know who Rick Mandyke was, but red carpet came out. Rick Mandyke's here. Hey, it's Rick Mandyke, and everyone's talking, and he goes up there and plays Inner Urge, and I had never heard anything like that before live, and it was different than like Pete, because Pete was more of a swingier. This is like a post-bop type sound. He sounded so freaking. It was so scary how good he was. It is, and again, it just totally blew my mind on that one. And that one was really nerve-wracking. So then every time I went to like the Tula's one, I didn't know if another Rick Mandyke style player would come. I remember hearing Travis Ranney, and I'm like, oh man, this is tough. There's a lot of good tenor players up here, so it's gonna have to figure out your own niche to stand out in a way. So.
Yeah. All right, so. Sideman work, computer work. When did you start composing and writing music? When did that whole thing start?
I very late, because I was into it like at 18. I would write stuff, and I thought I wrote a brilliant song that was just great changes and everything. And then some music, oh yeah, that's the bridge of Stalemates or something. So I'm like, and so I found that like maybe with the perfect pitch thing, you just get stuff ingrained where. I think I'm writing it out, and I wrote some brilliant piece, and then someone would smash me down on it, and I'm like, oh. And so I always became very nervous of playing original compositions. So sometimes I'd write them, and I'd be done with it, and then just go in the closet and never play it, and never want to record it because I was worried about like Marty McFly, like someone's gonna laugh at you type thing. So I was more comfortable with arranging stuff, because then even if they didn't like the arrangement, I'm like, well, this is the original, and this is what so there wasn't as much pressure. I really, for original compositions, I was always self-conscious of that, and then after a certain point, you get over that, and I found that I could write better, like funkier things than the jazz stuff, because the jazz stuff I always find out that I stole something subconsciously from someone else, some great composer. But some of the jam band stuff is funner to play, and it's cool. You really want to try to play the original stuff, because when you're playing, standard Green Dolphin Street or something. So when I'm playing it, I'm like, oh, man, how many other tenor players are playing on this song right now? Like as I'm playing, when you're playing an original or something, or even a weird arrangement of something that's not normally played by sax, I at least feel, hey, I'm probably one of the only tenor guys right now at this moment playing this song. And if it's an original, yeah, I'm the only one playing this one, unless someone stole it, I guess.
Right on. Well, can you talk about bandling a little bit? Because I remember the one that comes to mind right out of the gate is Players Club.
Yeah.
That was a band that you did a while ago now. Can you talk about just different projects that you've done? What was the first band that you led?
Well, we did the stuff over at Grounds. We did like with the Tacoma bands. I remember over at Habana, I remember seeing Joe Doria over there playing with John Wicks. And I want to play with an organ. That's awesome. Because I remember hearing Gene Ammons played with an organ. And I never heard that before. It was amazing. And so I did like the Cliff Colón trio at that time. It was an organ trio, and did that over at Jazz Bones for a while. So I guess that was probably the first one. And we didn't make a lot of, technically we didn't make a lot of money, but I was working and doing whatever I could to make sure I take care of the musicians, because the reputation was always important to me. So, yeah, I felt that it was like, I'm getting private lessons every week, doing a weekly session, and I'd bring in guests, and I get smoked by Tracy or smoked by some other person, and Julian Priester and others. So I did that, and then my wife and I, Sommer, we were listening to a band that was doing some more of covery type stuff. She was, at the time, we were just dating at the time, but she was playing in the disco band, Hit Explosion, and we wanted to do kind of our own thing at that time. So we didn't want it to be a standard like cover band. We wanted to do all this normal stuff. Like we wanted to do more of like the B side of pop records, and do more of a dance band thing, and do the corporate scene. And I always kind of liked playing funk stuff. I remember when I finally got so frustrated with the flute, I'm like, okay, I'm done with flute. I'm going to learn funk songs. I'm going to learn horn parts for Earth, Wind & Fire and stuff. And so then I would go to a lot of those disco gigs and learn the horn parts because I was decent at transcribing. So I'm transcribing the horn parts during the gigs. And so now, like, that's a lot of what I do is playing those kind of songs. But we formed that band, and we treated it kind of as like a jazz format, where we had charts. We had like a certain network of musicians, and we could sub out the gig. It wasn't something where everyone had to always be at the gig. Like when you do jazz gigs, you could switch out drummers, you could switch out bass players, keyboard players. And so we try to go with that approach, and like by calling it Players Club, like a lot of different players play in the band. Yeah, we tried to have like a core set of, if we could have 2 to 3 for each instrument, we could mix it. We could always get a band together, and we were doing that for a while, and that was a lot of fun. But then, the stresses of being a band leader, 1099s and all the dealing with the bookers and the advertisements.
Tell me more.
Oh, it's so much nicer to be a sideman. So because you show up to the gig, you play the gig, you go home, you get paid, and you don't have to deal with the other stuff. So we did that, but we did it for several years, and it was always as a great outlet. And a lot of those players, now we play in different style bands, but I prefer doing this. I always wanted to be kind of a mercenary sax player that could play, like, I'd play the jazz gig and play the funk gig and play. I always liked that kind of, because when I was growing up, I was watching Branford, and he's playing with the Grateful Dead and playing with Sting and playing with Wynton, and I always really aspired to be like that. But yeah, we did that for a long time, and that was a great outlet. Learned a lot about how to be a band leader, how to take care of your musicians. Sometimes I messed up where I forgot to cancel a gig, and I remember we were down in Oregon one time, and Osama I forgot to cancel on Osama. I canceled everyone else and gave him a heads up, and he's like, "Hey, I'm at the gig." I'm like, "Oh crap!" So so then you got to pay Osama because your reputation's worth more than anything. So like it just takes one time where you messed over a musician, and then word around to, "Hey, Cliff Cliff was partying down in Oregon and didn't." And I missed out on the money that's coming on. So it learned a lot about being a band leader and that side of it. Although I prefer not doing that. So.
Well, so I mean, you work as a sideman in a lot of groups, but ones that come to mind that I see here and there, like one that you've been a part of for quite some time, is Devon Lewis's Limited Edition.
Yeah,
correct?
Yeah, that one's a lot of fun. That's where I started feeling more comfortable with playing some of the originals that I have, because Devon's, like a 4th generation musician. He just gets it. I'm 1st generation. I'm trying to pave the way for my kids, so there could be 2nd gen. But Devon can make any song sound cool. Like we could play "Mary Had a Little Lamb." I bet Devon has a cool way of making it hip. And we wanted to play more original stuff. We didn't want to do standards or stuff like that. So so we've been doing that for a while and had a couple different albums. We have a new one that just came. We recorded it right before COVID, and then when COVID happened, it kind of shut it down. So we finally, within the last few months, finally mixed and mastered and have the videos coming out. We're probably not going to, I don't know if we're going to print CDs or anything, because I don't even have a CD player anymore. But we're doing more of like the YouTube thing. And then, yes, it did that. Contraband was another kind of, that's more of a project band.
Can you talk about that, please?
Yeah, so I was always inspired with jazz. Like a lot of the songs that I like playing, they were based off of Broadway shows and musicals and movies at the time, and my favorite Sound of Music or whatever. And but they're kind of dated for me. Like my mom and my grandparents liked it, and I was trying to figure out like what the standard. And I didn't grow up listening to a lot of rock stuff or the music that when I was a kid, but we all played video games, and I always liked the video game songs. I always thought they're unique, and sometimes they were written in a way like it's not a traditional way of playing certain lines because it's probably some dude with a MIDI program that did it. And so basically we took that concept of taking songs from the show tunes of your time, and then we took video game songs from Nintendo Entertainment System, and I don't know if we did Super Nintendo then, but yeah, we took video game songs from the 80s and 90s and arranged them in a jazz format. And I was inspired by the album Black Hope, the Kenny Garrett one with Joe Henderson, and I like that kind of that sound of the alto tenor sound on that. And so we did Contraband and did all the music from the video game Contra, and we did it in a jazz format. And that people still talk about. I mean, if I wrote my original album, everyone would forget about it, but because it's video game, they kind of remember it. And so then we did another on the 10-year reunion. We came back with Contraband Reloaded and did some more of like Super Nintendo ones and having guest musicians. But I was always kind of inspired by again taking that format of something that's not usually done as jazz and making it jazz and writing changes on it and stuff. So
I'm looking at the timer. I know we're over here in terms of getting into the questions. So is there anyone here that has any questions, either in person or online, for Cliff? Now is the time. Anything in the comments by chance? Any questions for Cliff?
Oh, yeah.
There's a crossover question for the urban prepper. That's a whole nother interview. But yeah, go ahead.
That's funny. Yeah.
The question is a joke question. How do you get your saxophone into one of those little tin boxes?
I'll try to. That's awesome that Greg knows. And now I'm a little nervous because Greg's watching. But so as 13 years ago, I started a hobby project called the Urban Prepper, where I was when I first got married, I was worried about being like, okay, I'm providing so I'm the husband, and then when we had kids, these babies rely on me for food and for everything, and so I started being, well, what happens if there's an earthquake? What am I gonna? So I started, I made a YouTube channel as more of like a creative outlet, but then people started kind of following it, and I started making little Altoids kits with little emergency supplies in it, and that's kind of how this kind of took off a little bit, and so that's been a whole side project where my whole life I've been trying to be known as a saxophone player, and then as a hobby project is what ended up people sort of knowing me for. But yeah, that's a whole. I haven't really crossed the music with the Urban Prepper, so the people that watch that typically don't know that I play. They don't know my last name. They don't know that I play music or anything because I'm worried about someone like, hey, I'm going to my kid's school or something. Hey, I'm friends with your dad, and that's been I learned a lot about I've learned a lot about YouTube and the algorithms and how to branding, online social media stuff, video editing, the audio editing, all that kind of stuff. Learn through that. But yeah, that's a fun hobby project, and it's awesome that.
So how do you get the horn in the case? We want to know.
Well, I don't think it's possible. You could have reeds in the case maybe, but my reeds are I think they're a little too long for the Altoids kids, but. Yeah, I'll see if I could figure out something. I don't think I'll be able to have a saxophone in the case, but I think you could do like the reed shavers. You could have like your tools. I could probably make a saxophone tools kit in Altoids.
Yeah. We have a question here.
Yeah.
So the question is, many musicians are multi-instrumentalists, and the question is, do you play any other instruments?
No. I could plunk out some first position chords on piano, enough to write a song. but that's about it. Yeah, Kareem is able to teach piano, but no, I'm still trying to learn how to play saxophone. So there's a lot of nuances on that one. But yeah, I tried clarinet. I was horrible at clarinet. Tried flute. For 20 years now, I think I'm the worst flute player in Washington. So. Uh, uh, but no, so I was bad at flute. Never guitar, nothing like that. If I could do it over again, I'd play bass, because I figured if I could read music and play acoustic and electric, I'd gig a lot. So, but that's if I could do it over again. But no, I'm still mainly sax, and enough to plunk out chords on a piano. So.
Is there another online question? So the question is from
on flute?
the infamous Tracy Knope. How do you finger high F sharp on the flute?
I sold my flute. I don't know. I don't remember.
My question is for Tracy Knope. What are you doing later this evening? We should go get a drink. That's all I'm saying.
I want to go to his pad afterwards.
Is the house open tonight? That's
Manor,
what we want to know.
The Tracy Knope Manor.
You can DM us. We'll be there.
I'm still trying to figure out the best fingering for high F sharp where I'm not flat on tenor. So, but yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions for Cliff? Oh, yep. So the question is, have you played anywhere else outside of Washington State? And you have some great stories about this.
I have a few good stories. Well, you do a lot of different tours with the bands and stuff. I did a tour a couple weeks ago with, not a couple years ago with Barrett Martin, who's a drummer. We did a California tour down in San Francisco and LA and stuff. He played with the Screaming Trees. Different. I'm trying to see yeah. There's a couple funny stories.
China.
Well, it wasn't China. It was. I played in Hong Kong. We stopped off at Tokyo and then went to Hong Kong and played a gig over there, and that was. We were treated like rock stars, and it was awesome. And we got to stay at the fanciest hotel in Hong Kong, and got all of our clothes dry cleaned. And so I remember getting my underwear and socks dry cleaned just because I could. and that was a lot. And then I remember when I went there after we did there was a nightclub with American jazz musicians, and it's some of the players are players with Players Club that we play. I'm like, hey, what are you doing over? And they're like, Cliff, why are you in Hong Kong? And that was pretty cool. I thought I saw a hand, but.
Yes, another question.
I played with Barrett Martin, who's the drummer from the Screaming Trees.
Was the name of that group Walking Papers? Was that the name of the band at the time, or is that a different project?
Not Walk. I don't know about Walking Papers. Yeah, but I didn't play. No, I didn't play with Screaming Trees, but I played with Barrett Martin with his group, which was cool. But now I'm playing in a group called Jazz Overhaul, and we do a lot of grunge. Again, kind of like Contraband, where we take something that's not usually jazz and we make it into jazz, and so jazz chord extensions and stuff, and so. We're doing that, and with a lot of Devon and Osama and some great players. And we're doing. We haven't done a Screaming Trees, but we're doing a lot of Nirvana and Pearl Jam and Alice in Chains, and yeah. Yeah.
Have you ever played with Dan Kramlich at all? Do you know Dan?
Yeah, I got to play with him once, and he has the grunge trio, which I didn't know until after we started doing our. I'm like, oh, this is really good. So, I played with them at the Space Needle. I remember a few years back.
Yeah, I figured you guys would.
I'm going to call him. Yeah, Dan,
yeah.
I'm going to call him.
Right on. Well, we're getting close to the end here. Really quickly before I forget, number one, thank you to everybody for watching and joining us either in person today or online, virtually, in real time or after the fact. And also thank you to our sponsors. Of course, that's Ted Brown Music, KNKX, Tacoma Creates, Edward Jones Financial Consultant Rick Gray, and Titus Wilcars. Wouldn't be possible without their support, and very happy to be able to do this. Thank you, Cliff, for joining us here today.
Thanks for having me.
If you find value in these things that we're doing every single week, which are absolutely free, feel free to make a donation. You can do that via Venmo or PayPal. The information's at the beginning of this post here, or you could also do it monetarily by mailing a check, and you can also read about how to do that at the beginning of the video here. We're going to be doing another one of these tomorrow with Clipper Anderson and Jeff Bush. That'll start at noon. We've got a concert today with a bunch of Cliff's original music and a piece by his son and a piece by his wife.
Yeah.
And then I've got some brand new music that we've written for this week as well. So stay tuned for that. And before I forget, there's also a very cool concert coming up on April 2nd. It's going to be a tribute to the great Bill Ramsey, who is still with us, and he's going to come play. There's a great big band, which will be led by Greg Williamson, and that's going to be at the Spanish Ballroom here in Tacoma. starting at 5 o'clock, going to 8 o'clock. It's absolutely free, all ages, so it's first come, first served seating, and you'll be hearing more about that soon, but mark your calendars and plan on joining us for that. And Cliff, so if you were asked by an aspiring musician who wanted to, have a life in music, what are some things that you found very beneficial to yourself and your growth as a musician that you would impart upon them?
Practice, long tones. The one, I guess, if something maybe more, if I could do it over again, for every like transcription book that I would get, I would probably also get something business style book where there's a lot of really great players out there that are awesome, but like the whole business part of it is like booking a gig and social media and marketing and how to do your tax stuff or you're booking all those. That's all stuff you're learning as you go, and it's for doing gigs and having people come out to them and running an email list and the web presence and what there's all this business part of music that it's not just you could be the best player in the world, but if you don't know how to book a gig, like it's a little tougher. So if I could do it, advice I would have is practice as obsessively and practice your scales in every single random pattern that you could think of, because it's going to come out subconsciously when you're playing over time. Play with as many people as you can, get smoked by as many people as you can, try to always play with people that are better than you, because then you're going to get better, and try to listen obsessively to everything that you can, and try to pull out inspiration from, if you're a jazz, you could get inspiration from all sorts of different bands. Right now I'm getting inspiration from Pearl Jam and try to bring it into jazz. So I think try to listen to as much music as you can, and then also keep in mind on the business part of it. And then again, your reputation's the most important thing. So it's don't screw anyone over on a gig. Your word is your bond, and this kind of thing. So take care of your rep too, because you could build up a whole big career and then you blow it with one instance if you do something wrong. So that's my advice.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being our guest today. We're going to take a very short break and then come back with some brand new original sight read music for you. So stick around.